The lives of the wives and mistresses of Nazi Germany's top leaders offer a compelling and often chilling glimpse into the personal dimensions of one of history's most infamous regimes. These women, linked by marriage or romantic ties to powerful figures within the Third Reich, occupied positions of significant social status and influence, though their roles and experiences varied widely. Some were ardent supporters of Nazi ideology, actively participating in the regime's social and political spheres, while others maintained a more private existence focused on family and domestic life. Their stories reveal the complexities of loyalty, power, and personal ambition within the context of a regime responsible for unprecedented atrocities. From Eva Braun, Adolf Hitler's longtime companion, to Magda Goebbels, who chose to end her life and those of her children as the Third Reich collapsed, and Lena Heydrich, who defended her husband's legacy until her death. The narratives of these women reflect both the allure and the ultimate destructiveness of their involvement with the Nazi leadership. Understanding their lives not only humanizes the figures behind the regime, but also underscores the broader impact of totalitarianism on individuals and families. Eva Braun. Eva Braun, born on February 6, 1912 in Munich, Germany, became historically significant as Adolf Hitler's longtime companion and, briefly, his wife. Despite her close association with one of history's most infamous figures, Braun's personal history and role in Hitler's life were relatively private until later historical examinations brought them to light. Eva was the second daughter of a school teacher and a seamstress. She led a relatively typical middle-class life and was described as lively and athletic during her youth. Braun met Hitler in 1929 while working as an assistant to Heinrich Hoffmann, Hitler's personal photographer. She was 17 years old at the time, and Hitler was 23 years her senior. Over the years, Braun became more closely associated with Hitler. She was often kept out of the public eye and was not involved in political matters. Their relationship was marked by significant secrecy, largely because Hitler wanted to maintain his image as a solitary figure dedicated to Germany. Eva Braun lived a relatively luxurious life at Hitler's residences, including the Berghof in the Bavarian Alps. She enjoyed photography, film, and other hobbies, maintaining a personal and somewhat isolated existence away from the political machinations of the Nazi regime. As World War II drew to a close and Allied forces closed in on Berlin, Eva Braun joined Hitler in his bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery. Her decision to stay with Hitler during these final days has been seen as a demonstration of her loyalty and commitment. On April 29, 1945, as the Soviet Red Army approached Berlin, Eva Braun married Adolf Hitler in a brief civil ceremony in the bunker. This marriage, lasting less than 40 hours, was a symbolic culmination of their long-standing relationship. On April 30, 1945, Eva Braun and Adolf Hitler committed suicide together. Eva took cyanide, while Hitler simultaneously took cyanide and shot himself. Their bodies were subsequently carried out to the garden behind the Reich Chancellery, where they were doused with petrol and set on fire, following Hitler's orders to prevent their remains from being captured by enemy forces. After the war, Eva Braun's role and personality were scrutinized by historians. She has often been portrayed as a passive figure, largely removed from the political atrocities committed by the Nazi regime. However, her close relationship with Hitler inevitably linked her to his actions and the regime's horrors. Some historians argue that Braun was apolitical and naive, while others suggest she was more aware of and complicit in the Nazi activities than previously thought. Despite her lack of direct involvement in politics, her life remains a subject of fascination and analysis in understanding the personal dynamics of Nazi leadership. Magda Goebbels. Magda Goebbels, born Johanna Maria Magdalena Ritschl on November 11, 1901, in Berlin, was one of the most prominent women in Nazi Germany due to her marriage to Joseph Goebbels, the Reich Minister of Propaganda. Her life and actions, especially during the final days of the Third Reich, have made her a notable figure in the history of the period. Magda came from a middle-class background. Her parents divorced when she was young, and she was raised by her mother and stepfather, Richard Friedlander, a Jewish businessman. She had a comfortable upbringing and received a good education. In 1921, Magda married Günther Quandt, a wealthy industrialist, and had a son named Harold. However, the marriage was unhappy, and the couple divorced in 1929. Magda retained custody of their son. Magda was introduced to the Nazi Party and its ideology in the early 1930s. She was attracted to the party's vision and became involved in its activities. In 1931, Magda met Joseph Goebbels, one of Hitler's closest associates and the Nazi Party's chief propagandist. They married in 1931, and Magda quickly became a prominent social figure in Nazi circles. The couple had 6 children: Helga, Hildegard, Helmut, Holdine, Hedwig, and Heidrun. As the wife of the propaganda minister, Magda was seen as the ideal Aryan woman and mother. She frequently appeared at public events and was often photographed with her children, promoting the Nazi ideal of family life. Magda was one of the few people who had direct access to Adolf Hitler and was said to have a close personal relationship with him. Hitler was a frequent visitor at the Goebbels home, and he became the godfather to one of her daughters. As the war turned against Germany and the Allies closed in on Berlin, the Goebbels family joined Hitler in his underground bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery. During these final days, Magda's actions would become infamous. On May 1, 1945, as the Nazi regime crumbled, Magda and Joseph Goebbels made the decision to end their lives and those of their children. Magda, with the help of an SS doctor, administered poison to her 6 children while they were asleep. Subsequently, she and her husband committed suicide, with Joseph shooting himself and Magda taking poison. Magda Goebbels has been remembered as one of the most devoted and fanatical supporters of the Nazi regime. Her willingness to murder her own children, rather than see them live in a world without National Socialism, has been widely discussed and analyzed. Various historians and psychologists have examined Magda's motivations, suggesting that her actions were driven by a combination of ideological fanaticism, personal loyalty to Hitler, and a desire to maintain her family's image as paragons of Nazi ideals. Emmy Goering. Emmy Goering, born Emma Sonnemann on March 24, 1893, in Hamburg, Germany, was a prominent figure in Nazi Germany due to her marriage to Hermann Goering, one of the most powerful leaders in the Third Reich. Her life was marked by a transition from a successful acting career to being part of the Nazi elite, and she faced significant repercussions after the fall of the regime. Emmy Sonnemann came from a middle-class family. Her father was a wealthy Hamburg merchant, which afforded her a comfortable upbringing. Emmy pursued a career in acting and achieved considerable success on the German stage. She became a well-known actress performing in various theaters across Germany. Emmy met Hermann Goering in the early 1930s. Goering, a World War I flying ace and one of Adolf Hitler's closest associates, was rising in power within the Nazi Party. They married on April 10, 1935, in a lavish ceremony attended by many high-ranking Nazi officials. As the wife of Hermann Goering, who held numerous titles, including Commander-in-Chief of the Luftwaffe and President of the Reichstag, Emmy became one of the most prominent women in Nazi Germany. She hosted numerous social events and was involved in various charitable activities, often presenting herself as the First Lady of Germany, especially when Hitler remained unmarried. Emmy enjoyed a life of luxury and privilege. She lived in opulent residences, including Karin-Hall, Goering's expansive estate, named after his first wife, Karin. She was known for her lavish lifestyle and her role in the Nazi social elite. Emmy was often seen at public events and was portrayed in the media as an ideal Aryan woman, embodying the virtues promoted by Nazi ideology. She supported her husband's career in the regime, though she was not heavily involved in politics herself. Following the defeat of Nazi Germany, Emmy Goering was arrested by Allied forces. She faced the repercussions of her close association with one of the regime's top leaders. Emmy was tried and convicted by a German denazification court. She was sentenced to 1 year in prison and her property was confiscated. The court deemed her a beneficiary of the Nazi regime, but not a major war criminal. After her release from prison, Emmy lived in relative obscurity. She faced significant financial difficulties and lived modestly compared to her previous lifestyle. Despite her reduced circumstances, she remained loyal to her husband's memory and continued to defend his legacy. Emmy Goering's life has been viewed through the lens of her marriage to Hermann Goering and her role within the Nazi elite. She has been portrayed as a woman who enjoyed the privileges of her position, but largely remained a passive participant in the political activities of the regime. Emmy Goering died on June 8, 1973, in Munich, West Germany. She left behind a complex legacy, marked by her glamorous yet controversial life during one of history's darkest periods. Ilse Hess. Ilse Hess, born Ilse Pröll on June 22, 1900 in Hanover, Germany, was the wife of Rudolf Hess, one of Adolf Hitler's closest associates and the deputy Führer of Nazi Germany. Her life was significantly influenced by her husband's prominent role in the Nazi Party and his mysterious solo flight to Scotland during World War II. Here's an in-depth look at her life. Ilse Pröll came from a middle-class family. Her father was a headmaster. She was well-educated and attended the University of Munich, where she studied economics and political science. Ilse met Rudolf Hess in Munich in 1920. Both were fervent nationalists, and they shared a strong ideological connection. They married on December 20th, 1927, and had one son, Wolf Rüdiger Hess, born in 1937. Ilse was a dedicated supporter of the Nazi ideology and her husband's political career. She was actively involved in the party's activities and supported Hess's close relationship with Adolf Hitler. As the wife of the deputy Führer, Ilse enjoyed a high social status within the Nazi elite. She was known for her strong personality and unwavering support for her husband's work. On May 10, 1941, Rudolf Hess made a dramatic solo flight to Scotland, intending to negotiate peace with the United Kingdom. His mission was unauthorized and shocked both the Allies and the Nazi leadership. Hess' flight was a failure, and he was captured by the British. Hitler denounced him, and Hess was declared insane by the Nazi regime. This event drastically changed Ilse's life, as her husband remained in British custody for the rest of the war. After the war, Rudolf Hess was tried at the Nuremberg trials and sentenced to life imprisonment. He was incarcerated in Spandau prison in Berlin until his death in 1987. Throughout her husband's imprisonment, Ilse remained devoted to him. She campaigned tirelessly for his release, maintaining his innocence and arguing that his flight had been a genuine peace mission. She wrote numerous letters, engaged in public speaking, and worked with various organizations to advocate for his release. Ilse Hess faced significant public scrutiny and hardship due to her unwavering support for her husband and her connection to the Nazi regime. Despite this, she remained a prominent figure among former Nazis and their sympathizers. After Rudolf Hess' death in 1987, which was officially ruled a suicide, Ilse continued to defend his legacy. She maintained that he had been murdered and continued to promote his version of events regarding his flight to Scotland. Ilse Hess lived out her final years in relative obscurity and died on September 7, 1995, in Lilienthal, near Bremen, Germany. Ilse Hess remains a controversial figure due to her steadfast support for her husband and her role within the Nazi elite. Her life story is a reflection of the complexities faced by the spouses of high-ranking Nazi officials. Historians have examined her life to understand the personal dimensions of those who were closely associated with the Nazi regime. Ilse's unwavering loyalty to Rudolf Hess has been both criticized and sympathetically portrayed in various historical accounts. Lena Heydrich. Lena Heydrich, born Lena Mathilde von Osten, on June 14, 1911, in Fehmarn, Germany, was the wife of Reinhard Heydrich, one of the most powerful and feared leaders of the Nazi regime. Her life was deeply intertwined with her husband's notorious career, and she faced significant repercussions after his assassination. Here's an in-depth look at her life. Lena von Osten was born into a middle-class family on the island of Fehmarn in the Baltic Sea. She was the daughter of a minor German aristocrat. Lena met Reinhard Heydrich in 1930 when he was a naval officer. They married on December 26, 1931. Heydrich was dismissed from the Navy shortly before their marriage, which led him to join the SS and rise rapidly through its ranks. Lena was a staunch supporter of National Socialism. She encouraged Heydrich's career within the SS and was actively involved in the Nazi Party's social circles. Her political views aligned closely with those of the regime. As the wife of Reinhard Heydrich, who became the head of the Reich Main Security Office and a key architect of the Holocaust, Lena enjoyed significant privileges and status. She played the role of the supportive spouse, hosting social events and managing their domestic life. Reinhard Heydrich was assassinated on May 27, 1942, in Prague by Czechoslovak resistance operatives in a mission codenamed Operation Anthropoid. He succumbed to his injuries on June 4, 1942. Heydrich's assassination led to brutal reprisals by the Nazis, including the destruction of the village of Lidice. Lena, now a widow, was awarded a generous pension by Hitler and given the honorary title of Frau Reichsprotektor. After the war, Lena faced the consequences of her association with one of the most notorious figures in the Nazi regime. She was arrested and interned by Allied forces but was released after a few years. Lena was subject to denazification proceedings, but she managed to avoid severe punishment. She faced social ostracism and economic difficulties in the post-war years. She took on various jobs to support herself and her children. Lena remained a staunch defender of her husband's legacy. She maintained that he was a patriot and downplayed his role in the Holocaust. She published her memoirs, Leben mit einem Kriegsverbrecher, Living with a War Criminal, in 1976, where she portrayed Heydrich in a sympathetic light. Lena eventually returned to her family home on the island of Fehmarn, where she lived a relatively secluded life. She ran a small guest house to make ends meet. Lena Heydrich died on August 14, 1985, in Fehmarn. She remained unrepentant about her and her husband's roles in the Nazi regime until her death. Lena Heydrich is remembered as a controversial figure due to her unwavering support for her husband and the Nazi ideology. Her attempts to defend and rehabilitate Heydrich's image have been met with significant criticism. Lena's life has been studied to understand the roles and attitudes of women within the Nazi elite. Her memoirs and interviews provide insight into the personal lives and motivations of those who were closely associated with the leaders of the Third Reich. Gerda Bormann. Gerda Bormann, born Gerda Buch on October 23, 1909, in Konstanz, Germany, was the wife of Martin Bormann, a prominent Nazi official who served as Adolf Hitler's private secretary and head of the Nazi Party Chancellery. Her life was deeply intertwined with the highest echelons of the Nazi regime, and she faced significant challenges and tragedies as a result of her association with Martin Bormann. Here's an in-depth look at her life. Gerda Buch was born into a family with strong ties to the Nazi Party. Her father, Major Walter Buch, was a prominent Nazi official and the head of the Nazi Party court. This background played a significant role in her early life and political orientation. Gerda met Martin Bormann through her father's connections within the Nazi Party. They married on September 2, 1929, and had 10 children together. Their marriage was strongly influenced by their shared commitment to National Socialist ideology. As the wife of Martin Bormann, one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany, Gerda enjoyed significant social status and privileges. Bormann was a close confidant of Hitler and wielded considerable influence within the Nazi hierarchy. The Bormanns had a large family, and Gerda was primarily responsible for raising their children. She was known for her strong support of Nazi principles and instilled these values in her children. The Bormann family lived in relative luxury due to Martin's position. As World War II came to an end, Martin Bormann remained with Hitler in the Führerbunker in Berlin. Gerda and the children were evacuated to Bavaria. Martin Bormann disappeared after Hitler's death on May 1, 1945, and was later confirmed dead. Following the collapse of the Nazi regime, Gerda faced significant difficulties. With her husband missing and presumed dead, she was left to fend for herself and her children. She moved frequently to avoid capture by Allied forces. After Gerda's death, her children were left orphans and were taken in by various relatives and friends. The Bormann children had to contend with the legacy of their father's notorious role in the Nazi regime. Gerda Bormann is remembered as a staunch supporter of Nazi ideology, deeply committed to the regime's principles. Her unwavering support for her husband and the party's ideals have made her a controversial figure in history. Gerda's life provides insight into the personal dimensions of the Nazi leadership and the roles of women within the regime. Her story highlights the impact of political ideology on family life and the long-term consequences faced by those associated with the Nazi elite.